Hi everyone. Today we will learn about the concept of food chain and food web. Now let us start with an introduction. Food chains are somewhat familiar to us in a vague sort of way. It may be mainly because human beings occupy a position at the end of a chain of food items or somewhere near to it. In this presentation, we will take a closer look at the different aspects of food chains, food webs, and the course of energy flow. Now, what is a food chain? Food chain is the interrelationship between different living organisms of nature in the sphere of energy production and utilization through a definite pattern of numerous stages of eating and being eaten up. Living beings, whether plants or animals, cannot live without food. So these interactions fall under a chain of systems which is known as the food chain. A food chain is mainly made up of producers and consumers, and sun is the main source of energy in the food chain and other events in nature. You may take other forms of energy into account as well, like the moonlight, wind energy, but remember, without sun, nothing is possible. Now, let us see a picture of food chain. Here, we can see a very basic example of food chain, where sun is the main source of energy. The green plants take energy from the sun and make food by photosynthesis. The deer eats plant. The deer is then eaten by tiger. So here you see the concept of eating and being eaten up. The deer is eating grass and the deer itself is being eaten up by the tiger. This means each and every organism is dependent on one another for living. Components of food chain. As said earlier, the main components of the food chain are producers and consumers. Now, what are producers? Producers are the green plants which make their own food with the help of simple inorganic substances, chlorophyll, and the energy of the sunlight. They are the base of the food chain. Since they are self-nourishing and can make their own food, they are also called autotrophs. They are mostly the photosynthetic plants, blue-green algae, and certain bacteria. So here we can see that the green plants can make their own food with the help of the process called photosynthesis, which no other organisms can. So they are the primary producers. Next is the consumer. Consumers are the heterotrophs, which are incapable of making their own food. They depend upon the primary producers for their food directly or indirectly by eating other organisms. We can classify the consumers mainly into the following types. Primary consumers, they are the herbivores which directly depend on primary producers for their food. Example, cow, goat, deer. Secondary consumers, they are the carnivores which feed on primary consumers. Example, fox, jackal, crow. Tertiary consumers, they are the larger carnivores which feed on both primary consumers and other secondary consumers. For example, tiger, which feed on both deer, herbivore, and fox, carnivore. Snakes feed on both frogs, which feed on both insects and plant matters. Apex and quaternary consumers. They feed on tertiary consumers and are at the top of a food chain. They do not have natural predators of their own. Example, tiger. Sometimes human beings are also at the top of the food chain. They don't have anyone to eat, but we all know that lion, bear, tiger, they all prey on humans too. Now, here I told you that the consumer depend on plants for their food directly or indirectly by eating other organisms. Here you see plants are eaten by squirrel and grasshopper. Grasshopper is eaten by scorpion. Scorpion and squirrel both are eaten by fox. If plants were not there, squirrel would not live and fox would die due to no food. So, indirectly and directly, we all are dependent on plants. Now, since we have a concept of food chain, now let us deal with the examples and types of food chain. Example of food chain. Grass is eaten by deer, is eaten by a tiger. Grass is eaten by insect, insect is eaten by snake, snake is eaten by owl. Phytoplankton is consumed by zooplankton, is consumed by crustaceans. Crustaceans is eaten by insects. Insects is eaten by small fish. Small fish is eaten by large fish. This is basically a food chain of water, aquatic food chain. Different types of food chain. Food chain can broadly be classified into three types. Grazing food chain, detritus food chain, parasitic food chain. Now let us illustrate with example of each. Grazing food chain starts from a plant base, goes to the grazing herbivores, then to the omnivores. Detritus food chain, it passes from the dead decaying matters to the organisms, then to the detritivores and their predators. Parasitic food chain, there is a decrease in size of organism as we go up the food chain. The organisms are the hosts from which parasites acquire nutrition. Example of a grazing food chain. Grass, grass is eaten by deer, deer is eaten by tiger. From the word grazing, you can see that it is the food chain basically of the herbivores, where grass is eaten by grazing animals like deer, cow, which in turn are eaten by carnivores like tiger, lion. Next comes the parasitic food chain. Birds eat insects, inside which lives the bacteria which acquire nutrition from them. We humans also have bacteria and parasites inside us, so they also acquire nutrition from us, resulting in the parasitic food chain. Example of detritus food chain. Dead leaves which fall on the grounds are eaten by detritivores, which are consumed by birds or fishes. Trophic level is the position occupied by an organism in the natural surroundings or in a community based on their feeding relationship with other organisms. It is based on the source of their nutrition. The number of trophic levels in a food chain is equal to the number of steps involved in the transfer of food and energy from one organism to the other. Now that the examples are over, we are trying to build a new concept on a topic called this food chain. Here we see a picture describing trophic levels. You see there are 5 steps in the food chain, and here the picture shows a terrestrial food chain and a marine food chain. So here you can clearly see there are 5 trophic levels as of now. the green plants are in the first trophic level, which are eaten by primary consumers. These primary consumers are in the second trophic level. Primary consumers are eaten by the secondary consumers. So, the secondary consumers are in the third trophic level. Secondary consumers are eaten by the tertiary consumers. So, the tertiary consumers are in the fourth trophic level. Quaternary consumers they are the organisms or the consumers which feed on the tertiary consumers, or they are on the final trophic level, or you can say the fifth trophic level. So each consumer level is each trophic level in a food chain. Now let us go under a different concept called food web. From food chains, we come to know feeding relationships in a biotic community. But in reality, the food chain is not an isolated system. It is always interconnected. An animal may feed on multiple prey or be eaten by numerous predators, which may be a link to more than one food chain. Thus, different food chains get interconnected, forming a feeding network, resulting in a food web. Thus, food web is a network of food chains which are interconnected at different trophic levels in a biotic community. Food webs provide stability to the ecosystem. Now, let us understand two examples. Here, in the picture on the left side, you see plants are eaten by rabbit, rabbit is eaten by snake, snake is eaten by wildcat. Again, the snake is also eaten by kite. So here, the snake forms a link to two different food chains. Thus, interconnection of two or more food chains give rise to food web. Here also, in the second picture that is on the right, we see the plant is consumed by grasshopper. The grasshopper is consumed by frog. Now the frog is consumed by a python. Again, butterfly eats plant. This same butterfly is eaten by frog. And this frog is again eaten by python. And also we can see that a python also feeds on wolf. And this python is consumed by an eagle. Again, that same eagle feeds on frog. So this python, eagle, all are interfering in different food chains, forming a complex network, resulting in a food web. You must remember that food chain is a single chain, whereas food webs are two or more food chains connected together. Now, we come to a new topic called the decomposers and their role in ecosystem. Here is a picture of the decomposers. Decomposers are mainly the fungi and the bacteria which obtain their food energy by the breakdown of the tissue of dead and decaying plants and animals. They feed on decaying matters that come from organisms from different trophic levels, that is, they run parallel and operate at every trophic level. Role of decomposers. Decomposers are a part of the ecosystem as they recycle and send back the nutrients to nature and make the soil fertile so that they can be reused by plants. In this way, the entrapped energy of the dead matters of the organisms are released back to the nature, thereby maintaining the nutrient pool of the nature. And now we move to the concept of energy flow and its consumption in ecosystem. energy flow and consumption in ecosystem. We know that the food consumed by organisms at different trophic levels provide energy for different life functions. However, with the increase in trophic levels, these transfers of energy decrease and thereby limit the length of the food chain. Here is a diagram showing the flow of energy. The energy of green plants are transferred to the rabbits, then on to the snakes, and then to the eagle. Here the picture is in the form of pyramid with upward pointed. This signifies as we go up the food chain, energy amount decreases. Now let us see what is written. Only 1% of solar energy is entrapped by plants for photosynthesis and rest is dissipated as heat. When the plants are consumed by herbivores, only a part of the energy from the producers is transferred, which is used for different metabolic activities like digestion, respiration. When the herbivores are eaten by carnivores, only 10% of the energy is entrapped for raising productivity and made available to the consumers of the next trophic levels. Thus, it can be assumed that on an average only 10% of energy is available for different consumers at each trophic level. As a result, maximum energy is required for performing life functions, so only the stored energy, which is of very little amount, is passed on to the next consumer. So, what is the reason for the decrease in energy in each trophic level? This is mainly because in each trophic level, a significant amount of energy is dissipated as heat, as I said earlier, and used for carrying out different life functions. A lot of wastage of food occurs during ingestion by herbivores. Energy is also used for digestion of food and cellular respiration. A part is lost as fecal matters to the decomposers. Also, organisms may also die instead of being eaten. As a result, the entrapped energy is transferred to the decomposers, who metabolize and send the energy back to the soil for reuse by plants. Thus, none of the energy actually disappears. They are sent back to the nature, always in different ways. Here is a picture. Here you see the producers get energy from the sun. Most of the energy is used up for different life functions and the rest is lost as heat, and then some amount of energy which is stored in their body is passed on to the subsequent consumers. The energy entrapped in dead and decayed matters are consumed by the decomposers, thereby sending back all the nutrients and the energy to the earth. Here the percentages are given. It is basically producers have 100% energy, primary consumers have 10% energy, which means out of the 100% energy of the producers, 90% are used up by the plants itself. They pass only the 10% of their energy to the next level. From here, we can conclude that the flow of energy is unidirectional. The energy that is captured by the autotrophs does not revert back to the sun. That which passes to the herbivores does not pass back to the autotrophs, and so on. At each trophic level, there is a progressive decrease in energy which limits the number of trophic levels in a food chain. Here you can see the unidirectional flow of energy in a diagram. The sun gives energy to the producers. The producers gives energy to the consumers. The consumers gives energy to the decomposers. Now the reverse doesn't happen. that is, the consumer never gives back the energy to the producers. The consumer eats the producers, that means they are getting the energy from the producers itself. The producers are not getting the energy from the consumers. So this is a unidirectional flow of energy, that is, the energy flows in one direction only and it repeats in a cycle. The sun gives energy to the producers give energy to the different consumers. After the consumers die, they give the energy to the decomposers then send back the energy to the soil, which are then goes back to the producers again. Now, biomagnification, that is the concentration of toxic substances along food chain. Here is a picture. Sometimes certain harmful substances like pesticides and other chemical fertilizers, instead of degrading, get concentrated at each trophic level. This is called biomagnification. The toxic insecticides applied on crops gets concentrated in the soil, which are taken up by the plants. When the herbivores consume these plants, the stored toxic substances of plants get concentrated in the body of the herbivores, which are then passed on to other consumers of different trophic levels until the top predators suffer from high doses of concentration. This is called bioaccumulation. Here you see the contaminant levels are getting concentrated at each consumer level, which results in the accumulation of the pollutants in the top predators. Thus, the use of harmful substances in nature is really harmful for all the living beings in the long run. And also there is an example. It has been seen that the large seabirds and hawks where pesticide level is high, reproductive abnormalities have been reported in their body. Biomagnification may threaten human food chains as well, when especially fish are affected. This is because we consume fish and other meat and plants. Now the plants consume the insecticides, which are then subsequently gets accumulated in our body. Now some questions. What is the place of human beings in food chain? Humans are at the top of the food chain. They do not produce food for themselves. They consume the food produced by species lying lower in the food chain and convert them into energy. They obtain energy from both plants and animals, and thus they are called the omnivores. What are the sources of pesticides in our food that causes bioaccumulation? The main sources of pesticides in our food items are mainly the insecticides like DDT that we use for killing pests and other insects. When these chemicals gets washed away in water, they are eaten by the detritivores, which are in turn consumed by fishes and other consumers. The insecticides which do not get excreted, rather they are stored in the fat of the animal body. When we eat the meat and fish, then they get accumulated in our body, resulting in fatal diseases. Now that is all for today. Hope you have liked the video. Thank you.